Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country. Eric Cohen and Shane Dale. It's mid-July, and yes, we still have a lot to talk about. I know it's kind of like a theme every week. We're like, what are we going to talk about in mid-July? Well, it actually helps when you have the guru of college football, at least when it comes to preseason publications, Phil Steele, joining us here on the program today. Shane, I'm really excited. This is our third straight year that we've gotten a chance to talk to Phil.
Yep.
And he's like one of the reasons, he's the type of interview. It's one of the reasons why I love doing this show so much. You learn things about the team that maybe you wouldn't have known from just reading his magazine, just getting a chance to talk to him a little bit.
Yeah, well, and the great thing is, we started this or relaunched this podcast because it was actually 6 years ago today that we're recording this, that Jeff Dean and I started the Wildcat Country podcast / radio show way back when I was working at ABC 15. We did that for about a year or so, and then it kind of, for a number of reasons, we had to discontinue, but then you and I picked it up again about 3 years ago, and we did it in the middle of a pandemic when there was no sports to talk about, and we still found things to talk about then. So no, never a shortage of things to talk about. There's always stuff going on the off season, and we got a Major League Baseball draft. We got, commits, possible commits in football and basketball, and, a couple of U of A commits playing overseas. So never a shortage. And then with Phil, it's great because it's kind of nice because, 2 years ago we had Phil Steele on to talk Arizona football. We're kind of, bracing for impact, right? And now we've kind of got some optimism. And even though a little bit semi-spoiler, he's a little not quite as bullish on Arizona this season as some other people are, and then maybe as you are, Eric, still looking forward to chatting with him about it.
Yeah, I'm getting more bullish on the season as we go along here. And I know that's kind of a dangerous formula for me. I know I'm not buying Rose Bowl tickets, Shane, or whatever else. Yeah. I'm just starting to think that a bowl game feels more promising than, let's say, I did when I saw the schedule come out in January, something like that. So I'm starting to feel it. Maybe it's because I'm biased that the season's getting closer and I'm buying into the hype, but man, I'm also buying into the Jed Fish hype. So let's talk a little bit about that here in Buy or Sell, which is presented by our friends at Ice Shaker. Go to iceshaker.com, use promo code Wildcat Country, capital W, capital C, and get $5 off your first purchase. Or you can go to fanatics.com and get one of these beauties that you can see behind Shane and I if you're watching the YouTube stream. And he just took a drink out of his ice shaker. These things are amazing, especially on the golf course when it's 115 degrees outside.
We got the half gallon Gronk shaker, I guess you might call it, because Rob Gronkowski, I guess, said, "Hey, I need something that's going to keep me hydrated." And so, you got the half gallon blue one. If you can watch the video behind both of us, and then I got the smaller one here with our logo, which is fantastic. You should definitely get one, or just there's a U of A logo at Ice Shakers as well. Definitely check them out. Keeps your drinks cold, keeps your drinks hot, depending on what you want.
All right, so this one's not necessarily a buy or sell, but we're gonna throw it in there nonetheless. So I was thinking the other day, would you rather have a coach in general, Shane, who's a great tactician and gets the most out of his players, but doesn't recruit well? Or would you rather have a coach who recruits well and his coaching acumen, at least in terms of how he coaches up players, is uncertain? AKA, would you rather have a coach like Rich Rodriguez or a coach like Jed Fish?
Well, you kind of asked, where would you rather be going into the third season? And I think I'd rather, considering how he's recruited, I definitely would rather be in the Jed Fish situation. Again, knowing what we know about the Rich Rodriguez era, I think just looking at his time at Arizona overall, I think he did well with the program. I think he really enjoyed his time in Tucson. When you take a step back, he only went 24-30 in Pac-12 play at Arizona. And that includes the year that they went to the Fiesta Bowl and won the Pac-12 South. So I think Jed and his coaching staff have been outstanding in terms of recruiting. I think it's what they've done so far in terms of recruiting is really validated Arizona's decision, the athletic department's decision to give Jed Fish a bigger budget for assistant coaches than the previous staff. And keeping that core together is going to be important. Obviously, Don Brown has already come and gone, but they replaced him with a great recruiter in Johnny Nansen. Kind of like your point. Is he a great coach yet? We'll have to see. I think it's too early to say. Definitely some questions there. And questions about Jed Fish in general, even going back to the last game he coached, we were, screaming at him to run the ball against ASU, and finally he did in the second half. But no, I think in terms of recruiting, I think that Arizona's recruiting has been as good, if not better, than it's been since the height of the Mike Stoops era, like 05, 06, when they were consistently bringing in top 40 classes. And there's still some they're still doing it now. Even, working in 2024, Elijah Rushing, obviously a quarterback prospect that we're going to talk about later. So you got to be careful of recency bias, but I'm definitely more optimistic about where this program, the ceiling for this program under Jed Fish than under Rich Rodriguez, which, I think under Rich Rod, if he would have stayed there another few years, you probably would have seen 6, 7, 8 wins a year, which is not bad for Arizona, but I don't think they necessarily would have gotten back to where they were in 2014.
Well, I think you just hit on a great point, Shane. The word ceiling is very important here. So with Rich Rodriguez, Arizona did hit a ceiling of making the Pac-12 championship game and getting to a major bowl game, which, just to remind all of you, ASU has not been in one of those New Year's Six bowls in more than 25 years.
You like to remind us of that often.
I do. Arizona was in one in the last decade. Thank you, Rich Rodriguez. So Rich had a higher floor than Jed Fish, obviously, but a lower ceiling, you would think, even though he got Arizona up there. I think the one appeal to Jed Fish right now is, how high is the ceiling? We don't know. Arizona, going into Rich Rod's third year, was coming off 2 bowl wins. Yep. You had the exciting New Mexico Bowl, and then you had like the Independence Bowl victory. So you were with not the best of talent, but he was able to coach him up. For me, I think I appreciate what Jed's doing. I like a higher floor because I don't want to sit there and watch terrible football over and over. Now, we saw that Rich Rod had his years where he stunk. I mean, the year 2016, they were 3-9.
Everything went wrong that year, off the field, especially injuries.
Right. Right. But in general, I like being in a bowl game more often than not.
Well, so, I think
either way on it.
Yeah, you have to consider the fact that I think Rich Rodriguez inherited a better situation than Jed Fish did. I know that things were on the way down with Mike Stoops, but Mike Stoops left him Matt Scott, who was perfect for his system, and Kadeem Carey, and at least some Power 5 level talent, which Jed Fish had very, very little of coming in. He was we talked about it. I think the situation when he came in was comparable or even worse to the situation that Mike Stoops had after the John Malkovich era. Yeah. So I think you have to consider that he had very little to work with. So going forward, I understand your perspective, and I think most Arizona fans would say, yeah, I would love to be in a spot where maybe sort of like the middle of the Mike Stoops era, like where you're maybe a 7 or 8 win team going into the year with a chance of maybe, if everything goes right, winning more than that and winning the conference or finishing second in the conference like they did in 2009. And I think that Jed Fish can get them there. Now, I understand this. Right now, we're just dying for a bowl game, right? Now, that wasn't necessarily the case in 2015 or 2009, so it's all relative. So I think that I don't think that Arizona is going to become a college football playoff contender, even when it expands to 12 teams. But top 25 more often than not is realistic. Top quarter or top third of the Pac-12 is realistic, as long as Jed Fish is here and is able to keep his staff together, which are 2 big ifs.
No, but wait a second. If Rich Rod could do it with a freshman quarterback in 2014, and a guy in Scooby Wright, who was a 2-star recruit, ended up being the defensive player of the country in a system that wasn't catered related to having terribly successful defensive players. I mean, for me, I'd want a coach that can coach him up. Now, we don't know. Jed might be that guy.
I think 2014, well, it was obviously an outlier, and I don't want to call it a fluky season, but there were a lot of things that went right. The game against Washington, where Washington could have run the clock out. The Hail Mary against Cal. Yep, you're right. I think that Arizona came a bit down to earth. We saw that in the Pac-12 championship game and then the Fiesta Bowl. So no, they deserve to get there, but there's a reason why they didn't stay up there, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, every good team, though, well, with the exception of an SEC powerhouse, generally has some luck on their side. Now, Arizona had extreme luck that season. I think we knew that, but okay, fair enough. It's an interesting debate. You guys think about it. Leave some comments in the YouTube chat if you're watching us on there. All right, number 2, Shane, not quite a buy or sell, but we'll go with it nonetheless. Over under 7.5 games out of 12 that Arizona scores 30 or more points this season. Are you going over or under?
You could phrase that as a buy or sell. Do you buy or sell that they'll give up more than 30 points 8 times?
No, we're gonna say score first.
Okay. No, I know. I'm just saying, if you want to actually fit into the buy or sell category, semantics, whatever. Mm-hmm. So over under 7.5. So basically, if you want to believe they're not going to give up 30 against NAU or UTEP, which they probably won't, then they'd have to give up 30 or more in 8 of their other 10 games.
No, let's talk about score 30 or more right now.
They're going to score 30 or more. Score 30 or more in 7.5, probably. Yeah,
Okay.
I think, and part of that might just be because I think they are going to get blown out a couple of times, and they're probably going to be some garbage time points. But I also think they're going to win some games with scoring over 30 as well. I
So
know that's a big.
Arizona scored 30 or more points 8 times last year.
Okay.
So, okay, just putting that in perspective, at Mississippi State, that seems like one where you're probably not going to score over 30 points. But in the Pac-12, I don't see a defense outside of maybe a Utah where I'm going, Arizona can't score 30 points against these guys. So you can make a legitimate argument that Arizona in 8 of their 12 games or 10 of their 12 games should be able to do that. Now, you got to figure there are going to be another few bad offensive outputs that maybe they don't get there, but I will take the over there. I'll buy the over 7.5 in that regard.
Well, they got 8 last year, and I think their offense is going to be better this year, but I think it's going to have to be because their schedule is tougher. But I think that they returned so many guys. The quarterback, all the tailbacks are coming back. Wide receiver, they're still in very good shape despite Singer leaving. The offensive line looks pretty good. So I think they'll be, they should average at least a few more points per game, even with their tougher schedule. So I'll go ahead and I will, in phrasing it as a buy or sell question, I will buy that they will score 30 at least 8 times.
Okay. Now let's go to the defensive side.
Yep.
Last year, they gave up 30 or more points 8 times. Okay. Are you buying that they will give up as many or more, 30 or more in as many or more games? Or are you going to sell and say 7 or less games of 30 or more points that the opponent scores against Arizona?
All right. Yeah, I jumped the gun on this one, but I go back to the NAU UTEP scenario. If they don't give up 30 in those games, then they'd have to give up 30 in 8 of the next 10, or the other 10. And I think they probably will. I think they're, Oregon's not on the schedule, so you have that going for them, but all the tough road games they have, you look at the schedule, maybe they don't give up 30 to ASU, even though that game's on the road. Maybe they don't give up 30 to Colorado, even though that game's on the road. But I think the defense is going to struggle again this season, especially because they have, if nothing else, they have so many new faces. They're going to take a while to get their footing. So, and it's, I just said they're going to score more than, or at least 30 points in 8 or more games. And I think they're probably a 5 or 6 win team. So I got to say they're going to give up 30 at least 8 times.
Okay. I'm going to say, you know what, Shane, call me crazy. I'm going to say under. I'm going to sell this one.
Okay.
I think the number is going to be 7. I just have a feeling this defense is going to improve enough to where I'm not saying they're not going to average 30 plus points against, but like, I don't know if Mississippi State is going to drop 30 on Arizona this time.
Even in Starkville,
but you don't have a Mike Leach offense. You're going to have a more conservative offense there. Okay, maybe that's one. They shouldn't give it up against UTEP or NAU. So I can make an argument that the first 3 games, and then, then I'm saying at that point, 7 of 9 Pac-12 games. Okay, that would make sense. I don't know. I'm going under. I'm just a gut feeling. If it goes under, Arizona makes a bowl game. I'll tell you that. If it goes over,
absolutely.
Yeah. If I'm right, Arizona's in a bowl game, and they're going to win 6 games.
Well, yeah, I hope you're right.
If I'm wrong, then 5 or less wins seems more probable. Just a kind of a hunch there. All right. Last one in buy or sell. I thought about this one as well the other day and just wanted to get your thoughts on it. When sold out, which as we know is kind of a rarity, Arizona Stadium can be one of the 5 most intimidating places to play in the current Pac-12. Buy or sell?
I've only been to a couple of Pac-12 stadiums, so it's kind of hard for me to really put it out there. But I will say this. I don't know about the most intimidating, but it certainly can be one of the loudest stadiums. Yeah. And it hasn't happened in a while, but it's certainly possible. I think back to a couple of examples. The 2010 game against Iowa, when Arizona finished the game with 3 straight sacks of Ricky Stanzi. That place went nuts. In fact, go back and watch the video. I'm sure it's on YouTube from that game, or at least the end of that game. Listen to the crowd reaction after that last sack. Even over TV, you could tell it just got turned up to 11 in that stadium. So the place went crazy. I think also there were a lot of Iowa fans there, and Arizona fans were trying to shout them down. So that kind of made for a fun atmosphere. And then I think back to the 2014 game against ASU. I was in the press box for that one, but you could tell how crazy it was. Even with the press box being enclosed. And Scooby still said more than once that the loudest he ever heard that stadium was after that strip sack early in the game he had against Taylor Kelly that resulted in a touchdown and an early Arizona lead. So I'm not sure about the intimidation factor, and it's really hard for me to to compare because I just haven't been to a lot of the other Pac-12 stadiums. But when that stadium is packed for a big game, it can be as loud as any other I've ever been to, college or pro.
All right, so let's kind of break this down. I think you look at the Southern Cal stadiums; they're generally too big and rarely sell out. So it's really hard to get 90,000 UCLA fans in the stadium or 75, 80,000 USC fans without having an opponent fans there. So I'm gonna disregard those two. I don't think the Bay Area schools care enough. To be honest,
that's a good point.
I think Oregon definitely.
Yeah.
I think Reser Stadium, once again, smaller stadium in Oregon for Oregon State. They, I guess, have enclosed it. So that certainly has helped. I'd put that up there. I think the Palouse in Washington State in Pullman can be intimidating, especially at night. Husky Stadium as well.
Yep.
I would say Rice-Eccles Stadium in Utah. I guess it's up there. I don't know.
The impression I get just watching Utah games on TV, it looks like a pretty rowdy atmosphere. So I'd probably put Rice-Eccles ahead of Arizona.
And we don't know what Folsom Field's going to look like when it's actually full for Colorado. So I don't know what to make of that. I think Arizona, when sold out and fired up, like if there's a game later in the year, let's say against Utah, where Arizona is, 7-3 or something like that, and has a chance to do something significant, and let's say that place is sold out, I think it could get really loud. And I think back to the one game that I remember is one of the loudest, the Oklahoma State game against, I think it was Rich Rod's first year was one of them, the Iowa game you mentioned, but the Oregon game in 2009 that we know how that ended up with the fans rushing.
I was there for that one too.
Section. Yep. We were all there for that one. That one was so loud. I just remember going, wow, that was loud. Even there were times during the ASU game that you and I were most recently at where you're like, wow, this place is pretty loud.
Yeah.
It can get up there.
Yeah. Well, and I'll throw this out too. If you think about if you're a student athlete who plays at one of the other Pac-12 schools and played Arizona in Arizona Stadium 2 years ago, when it was maybe half full, the team was terrible. Think about maybe you're preparing for a trip there this year and Arizona's a better team. And you all of a sudden you go out in the field and the place is sold out and going crazy. You might not be prepared for that, right? You have it in your mind. Oh, this is this is a cupcake game. Half the fans are going to be there. It's not an intimidating environment. If you have that environment and Jetfish is pleaded for it constantly, and you might get it this year if you have some success, then maybe there is that intimidation factor, and it throws the opposing team for a bit of a loop before the game and even during the game.
Just think about that one. I want to see Arizona Stadium return to those levels. I'm not sure that we will this season, but at some point I think so. And I can't wait to be a part of a sold out crowd that is loud for the entire game. I am envious of the schools where you see it. And I'm thinking, come on, fans in Tucson, let's show up. Would be kind of fun to be a part of that once again. All right, so let's talk a little bit more Arizona season preview. It may be early July, but hey, what the heck? We're talking to the guru of college football. I'm not even sure what better way to describe him. It's Phil Steele here on Wildcat Country.
What's up, Wildcat Country? It's Robbie G, baby, and I am gearing up for a big year with Coach Jetfish and excited to see what the Arizona Wildcats do this football season. And just like the football team, we stepped up our program as well with the official licensed U of A Ice Shaker, baby. Check it out and get it at fanatics.com. Bear down, Arizona. Let's go.
Shane, for the third straight year, we are so lucky to be joined by Phil Steele, who puts out, without a doubt, the best preseason publication on college football that you'll find anywhere. And his information during the season is just as good. Just go to philsteele.com and he'll tell us more about that. But we're going to talk Arizona football with Phil because he's an encyclopedia. There's nobody that knows more college football than Phil Steele. So, Phil, we're really glad to have you here. First of all, I'm going to start with kind of a critique on the magazine. You had Arizona's defense as the projected worst in the country based on your power rankings. Now that I understand they have 3 starters back and have added a lot through the transfer portal, what goes into those rankings? And do you really believe that Arizona has the worst defense in the country?
It's strictly computer rankings for starters. And what I do is I do about 9 sets of power ratings, and then we play them against the schedule that they have for the upcoming season. And that's what the computer spit out. And amazingly, guys, what I do at the each year is when I'm writing the forecast, the offense and the defense, I always flip back to see what the computer projected for the previous year. And amazingly, it's almost extremely close to how it finishes for the season. So defense is a question mark. Talking to Coach Fish, I feel the defensive line will be improved. The rush defense has to be improved after giving up 5.6 yards per carry last year. But that's just what the computer spit out. There is none of it would have been in my personal opinion.
All right. Well, and like Eric said, and Eric's prone to hyperbole, but you really are the best, and we appreciate you joining us for a third straight year. And don't take this the wrong way, but I hope your computer models are way
there you
off
go
this year. Let me take a step back for a second, Phil, and just get your overall view of this program. Like you mentioned before we started recording, you don't get to talk a lot of Arizona football, but I know you had a long chat with Jedd Fisch recently. What do you think about him and what he's done in Tucson so far, and where he's trying to take this program?
I love the direction Arizona is headed. You go back to year one; it was not a great year. Arizona finished just 1-11 that year. But if you look at it closer, they had 4 losses by 7 points or less. They outgained 5 of their opponents during the year, and they're only minus 17 yards per game in Pac-12 play, which is much better than a team that only won 1 game. And then last year, this team nearly got to a bowl game, for crying out loud, at 5-7. I thought that was tremendous improvement during the year. And they, of course, brought in the number 2 recruiting class in the Pac-12 in 2022. And then this year, once again, adding some players. And really, one of the main topics that I had with Coach Fish going over the team was that defensive line. They needed to get it improved. He knew they needed to get improved. And you look at the transfers they brought in up front, they've got 5 guys coming in as transfers that should have an immediate impact on the defensive line and make them much tougher there. And hopefully that will skew the computer's forecast on the defensive projections.
From my perspective, Phil, Arizona has as much depth at the tailback position as just about any team in the conference. When you look at Michael Wiley, who's returning, Jonah Coleman, DJ Williams are all back, and then Speedy Luke, who we hope to see more of this season. You only have Arizona ranked as the 9th best running back unit in the Pac-12. Why is that?
I do think there's a lot of talent in the Pac-12 when it comes to the running back core. And if you look at the overall numbers, the top rusher had 700 yards and number 2 rusher had 500. You're just looking at the overall talent there. It's a tough conference, the Pac-12.
Yeah, and Phil, I think, looking at one area where you really praised Arizona was their receiving unit, where you ranked them, and I hate to spoil it from the magazine, 11th among all units in the country. And I think I would assume that probably doesn't even include the addition of Montana Lamonius Craig from Colorado. Just your opinion of how important that unit is to Arizona with Jacob Cowing, Teteroa McMillan, and Lamonius Craig, among others.
Yeah, it did include Lamonius Craig because we did get him in there for the magazine. But, they lose their number 1 wide receiver in Singer to USD. But Cowing was a guy who I was very high on. As you recall, last year probably when we talked, I know I would have been high on Cowing because I loved what he did at UTEP. He came in, had a 1,000-yard year. McMillan, he might have thought, hey, maybe he gets 1,000 yards last year. Not too bad for a true freshman, 702 yards. Now he's going to be a bigger threat. And then Lamonius Craig coming in as well. So they are deep at the receiving core. I also like their tight end, Tanner McClatchin. So overall, this is a very good receiving core. And there's a lot of good ones out there. You go back to Ohio State, regarded as the top one in the country, Washington number 2. To be number 11 in the country is pretty good this year.
Yeah, when you see Arizona as number anything, getting a write-up in your magazine with any individual unit, that Jedd Fisch from a team that hasn't made a bowl game in how long? Super impressive. Now, one unit that was higher than I actually expected it to be was the offensive line, which you have as ranked as number 60. When you think of Arizona on offensive lines, not recently have we been very good, but you seem to see some talent there. You have an Arizona member or an offensive lineman on your 2nd team All Pac-12 and Jordan Morgan on your 4th team Pac-12. Just your overall thoughts of that unit for the Wildcats.
Yeah, and what I do when I talk to the coaches, I send them over my team sheets, which have every player on the team, all my notes that are on every single player, and then we go over every player at the individual positions and ask for a recap of how they feel about the position overall. And Coach felt really good about the offensive line and felt that if healthy, they've got potentially three guys that could be drafted in the future. So this is a line that's coming together, and you look at the recruiting that he's done. A guy like Raymond Polito, who is my number 72 rated offensive line coming out of high school, he's a guy that could just step right in, and I projected him to start right off the bat. They've got depth, I think, better depth than what they've had, and they've got talent. As mentioned, there could be three guys on this offensive line that get drafted in the future. So I was pretty pumped up about the offensive line after talking to Coach Fish.
Phil, what are your thoughts on Jaden DeLora? I know the Pac-12 is loaded at the quarterback position. He's obviously talented, but you got guys like Caleb Williams and Bo Nix and Michael Penix and several others who might be ranked ahead of him in the Pac-12 rankings. Where would you put Jaden DeLora?
I didn't put him in my top four because of the big names they have there. But, here's a guy that's coming off a great year that they had. And remember, last year he had to learn the offense. And he only had limited time to learn the offense last year. And when he first got to Arizona, he weighed 182 pounds. Now he weighs 208 pounds this spring. You got to like that. So he's got the weight gain. And yet, despite the weight gain, he's probably faster than what he was coming in. So he's a guy that's very mature, very productive. I mean, last year he threw for 3,685 yards. I think that was second best in the Pac-12. And I would put him right up there with all the other quarterbacks.
I've told Eric this several times. He's probably tired of hearing it, but I think Arizona could be even better this season, but still finish with maybe 5 wins because I think the rest of the Pac-12 has improved as much collectively, if not more so. And Arizona's got a tougher schedule than last year. What do you see things around about the same way?
Yeah, that's my sentiment exactly. Looking at Arizona, I got to tell you, after talking to Coach Fish, going over the roster, I was pretty pumped about this team. That's my third process, and then I look at the schedule. And unfortunately for Arizona, they only have 4 Pac-12 home games, which is, you play 9 conference games. You want to be the team with 5 conference home games. Well, they only have 4. And as we know from last year, watching Pac-12 football, there was a top 6 and a bottom 6, right? The top 6 teams pretty much won the majority of the games. And unfortunately for Arizona, those are the teams they host. Washington, they host Oregon State, UCLA, and Utah, 4 of the top teams. You look at the road games where you want the winnable games at home generally. Well, now Arizona State's on the road, Colorado's on the road, Washington State's on the road, Stanford's on the road. So the majority of the winnable games are on the road. Now, Arizona impressed me last year by ending that 14-game Pac-12 losing streak on the road by beating UCLA. I thought that was a big game, and that should give them some confidence. And I do think they win some of the road games this year, or I wouldn't have picked them as high as I did in the Pac-12 because I've got them above teams like Arizona State and Colorado. So I agree with you 100% on that sentiment. I think this is definitely a stronger Arizona team, but that schedule is not tailor-made for big-time success.
Let me ask you one more question, and I'll let Eric take it away. I want to ask about one game specifically because it's early in the season. It's their biggest non-conference game at Mississippi State, and Arizona lost to them at home last year by pretty good margin. Obviously, a lot of change in Starkville after Mike Leach's passing. But how do you think Arizona matches up against Mississippi State this year, especially going on the road?
I like the fact they're playing them early in the year. That's a plus because Mississippi State's changing their offense. They are going to run the football a lot more. I don't think you're going to see Will Rogers putting up the amount of yards, and they're clearly going away from the air raid offense. They're going to more assigned routes for the wide receivers. So that's a change in offense. It's the second game of the season. They do have the veteran quarterback in Will Rogers. They also have the heat and humidity. Now, you guys are used to the heat, but it is going to be very humid there in Mississippi State. Although last year, remember in the opening game of the season, it was so hot in San Diego State, and the Arizona players in the fourth quarter were like, big deal.
Right.
San Diego State seemed to be San Diego State seemed to be worn down in the second half. So I think they should be able to handle that. I like the fact it's early in the season, and I like the fact Mississippi State's making changes. I still do favor Mississippi State in the game, but I think it's going to be a heck of a game.
All right, Phil, 3 last quick questions here. First of all, I have to ask you this because we have you
Eric,
on the horn here. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Eric, let me ask you about how hot was that in San Diego State?
Phil, I have never, and I've been to a lot of football games in my life. I have never been to anything like it. It was a brand new stadium. There was no shade, and the water and or the
No ice,
soda
right?
machines. Yeah, the soda machines were broken.
Yeah.
There was no flavor in the soda machines. No ice. It was dreadful. I was in the end zone, and it was very hot. But let me tell you, it was worth every second of it in the end. Watching Arizona, it was the first time I had seen Arizona win a game in person because I had missed the Cal game the year before in 3 years. So it was worth it. But you don't expect San Diego, and I don't know how often you get a chance to go out there. You don't expect it to be 100 and something degrees. Let me tell you that.
Definitely not.
All right, so I have 3 quick questions for you, just because we have you here. All right, so let's talk about the Pac-12 real fast. You like USC. I tend to like Washington as the primary candidate to upset them and potentially get to the college football playoff. Would you agree with that assessment, or do you think there are teams other than USC who are better than the Huskies this year in the conference?
I put Utah, Oregon, and Washington all in the same basket, basically. I've got them all tied for second. I think talent-wise, Utah's strengths are actually at the offensive line and the defensive line. That's where you want to be strong. Coach Whittingham said that he feels that their offensive line, defensive line combined might be the best, if not one of the best in the country. Plus, they've got the veteran quarterback in Cam Rising. Utah, unfortunately, has to play USC on the road, Washington on the road, and Oregon State on the road. And keep in mind, they're just 7-7 on the road the last 3 years. Oregon, remember at the end of the year last year, Bo Nix was banged up, hobbling around a little bit those last 2 games. It wasn't quite Bo Nix, but they still had an outstanding season. They blew that big game against Oregon State. This year they have to play Utah on the road, which is a very tough spot. And then Washington. Husky Stadium is one of the loudest venues in the entire country. So they've got 2 tough road games. And with Washington, I guess my biggest concern there is not the talent. I mean, they've got their quarterback back in Michael Penix. They've got my number 2 receiving core in the entire country. They've got the head coach in Kalen DeBoer. They've got a tough defense, especially in the front 7. My biggest question mark is last year they avoided USC and Utah, and this year USC and Utah are both on the schedule. Now I think they're going to be 8-0 when they travel to face USC on the road. So that game's going to tell you whether or not they can get there and win the Pac-12. They also have to play Oregon State on the road, which is tricky because Oregon State's 12-1 at home in Riser Stadium the last 2 years, and that one loss was to USC, a game they could easily have won. And now Riser Stadium is filled in. I mean, before the last 2 years, there's been construction and maybe half the stadium hasn't been filled. Now it's a completely full stadium. That's going to be a tough place to play. But Washington clearly has the talent to get there this year.
So in looking at your national preview, I'm looking for a team that may sneak into the Final Four this year. And I am actually, based on reading your previews, I kind of want to fade Alabama and put Texas A&M in there based on the talent and the amount of starters that they have coming back. Give me a team that you like, kind of a surprise team that may sneak into the college football playoff.
Yeah, and I think A&M does have that opportunity this year. I'll go back to my number 1 most improved team, Texas A&M. And last year when I was talking to Coach Fisher, going over the squad with them, we would finish a lot of position categories, like the offensive line, for example. We get to the end of the offensive line, I'm like, okay, Coach, how do you feel about the offensive line? He's like, Phil, we're going to be really good, one of the best offensive lines in the country next year. He didn't say this year, he said next year. And that happened in a lot of the positions we went over. They were number 124 on my experience chart last year, a very inexperienced team. They lost their top wide receiver, Anaya Smith, in week 4. They started 3 different quarterbacks during injuries. They suffered a myriad of injuries on defense as well. And they finished just 5-7. However, in a 5-7 season, they beat LSU, the team that was in the SEC title game. And that the Alabama game, they played them on the road. They were at the 2-yard line at the end of the game, throwing in the end zone with a chance to win it, down by 4 points. So this is a team that was much better than its record. Jimbo's done a great job recruiting. They got 10 starters back on offense, 10 on defense. This year, they're number 14 on my experience chart, and I think they can definitely surprise. Another one I'm going to throw at you, my number 1 surprise team, is Wisconsin. And with Wisconsin, I had some question marks about Luke Fickell going in there, changing the offense to more of a pass offense. We all know Wisconsin dominates in November because they run the football and when the weather gets bad and wears teams down. But Coach Fickell promised me they were not just abandoning the run. They were just adding the pass to the offense with Tanner Mordecai from SMU, And of course, Longo coming over as the offensive coordinator from North Carolina. He felt it was going to open up the run game more for Braylon Allen and Ches Malusi. They've got that big offensive line still. Last year, their defense only had 3 starters back. This year, they have 8. And the schedule sets up nice. You look at their road games, they're against Washington State, Purdue, Illinois, Indiana, and Minnesota, all winnable. Toughest 2 games, Iowa at home. And they also play Ohio State at home the week after Ohio State plays Penn State. So it wouldn't surprise me if Wisconsin gets to the top of the Big Ten this year and sneaks into the playoff despite being just 7-6 last year, much like a TCU from last season.
One of my college football buddies that I'll go to games with every year is a diehard Wisconsin guy and a grad. He will love hearing this on our show. So thank you for that, Phil. All right, last question. Shane and I were talking about this before the show. Your routine during the season is something to behold. Can you sum it up for us? And then part 2 of that question is, where can people find the magazine, and tell us about philsteele.com?
Yeah, I appreciate that very much. Yeah, during the season, I got 12 TVs in front of me, and then if a game's not on TV, I have it on my computer next to me, so maybe 13 screens going on, and I'm watching it all day long. A lot of Diet Mountain Dew gets ingested just to stay alert during the course of the day, and it ends at that 3 o'clock in the morning when that damn Hawaii game finishes. But right. I try to watch every single game, and then during the week, I'm watching replays, meeting with my staff, going over all the little interesting tidbits for the season. Probably work about 100 hours a week during football. And then we go in the 7-month process of the magazine. We start writing this thing the Sunday after Thanksgiving and spend 7 months on the magazine. It's written in 3 parts. The first part is postseason right through, then a pre-spring right through, and then after talking to the coaches, and I talked to probably 122 of the 133 head coaches this year. Now, the magazine is 352 pages. You get 3 to 4 times the amount of information as any other magazine. It goes to the press after the portal closed, 3 weeks after the portal closed, so we get all the latest transfer moves in there. It's available this year at Barnes & Noble and Books A Million exclusively. If you bought it in years past at Walmart, Kroger, places like that, it's Barnes & Noble, Books A Million exclusively, or you can go to philsteele.com. And when you go to philsteele.com and order it, there is a shipping charge. Naturally, it costs money to ship things, but we give you the digital magazine absolutely free when you order the hard copy. That's a $19.95 value. So you go to Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, or philsteele.com, and do check out philsteele.com all summer long. I'll have blogs up there each and every day.
So, Phil, I just got to ask real quick, like when all those dozen games are on your TVs and computers, what are you doing? Are you taking notes on a notepad? Are you typing furiously on a computer? What are you doing all day?
Combination of the things, and a lot of it is just absorbing. And that's the one, you put me in a grocery store, I couldn't figure out the way to get to the cash register. But if you asked me about a game that happened 3 years ago, I could probably go play by play with you.
Nice.
New idea for a contest, Phil. Spend a day with you during college football season, because I guarantee you there are a lot of us that would absolutely love to do that and see how this works. You do a great job, and we always appreciate talking with you, and best of luck going forward.
Hey, thanks a lot. A lot of fun talking Arizona football today. I don't get to talk Wildcat football a lot. Hopefully we do that in the future. And thanks for having me on for a 3rd straight year. It was a lot of fun talking football with you guys.
Very good catching up with Phil. Always a wealth of information, and I don't know how he does it, Shane. To live like that and watch 13 games at once sounds like a dream come true for me. But all the writing, I do some writing for my current job with Sportsline, and even a small amount of writing is a lot. I don't know how this guy does 350 some pages of a magazine every year and multiple rewrites. Is crazy. Imagine having a dozen TVs to watch college football on, and hey, I'm just doing my job. Right. And that's literally what he does. You follow him on Twitter, like he'll show his workspace. It's pretty awesome. But it's interesting that he and I kind of see Arizona football the same way this season. We're very optimistic about the future of the program. We don't necessarily think there's going to be a leap forward, at least not a big one in terms of the win total this year for a number of reasons, concerns about the defense and the schedule being on top. So hopefully you're right and I'm wrong, that because I'm as of now would lean to Arizona not getting to a bowl game. But I understand his perspective. I still disagree with him a little bit on the running back situation, because I think Arizona's got one of the best running back rooms in the Pac-12 and maybe one of like the top third in the country. But great stuff. Definitely check out the magazine. I had a thorough look at his Arizona preview
before we chatted, and hopefully we'll be able, when we talk about to Phil again next year, it'll be after an Arizona bowl game.
Boy, I would love to hear that. It's music to my ears. Another kind of recruiting success that Arizona seems to be having. We talked about Elijah Rushing last week and what a 5-star commitment meant to this program. Well, yeah. Damon Williams, a quarterback from Basha High in Chandler, decommitted from Ole Miss, which I don't even know why I'd choose there in the first place. He's a 4-star quarterback. He's the 17th best quarterback in the country, according to 24/7 Sports. And all of their lead experts are predicting that he ends up at Arizona. 5'11" quarterback. Basically what they're saying about him, Shane, that he is an accurate down-the-field passer with a great feel for a deep ball. He is a top-flight competitor and leader with necessary intangibles, potential multi-year starter at an elite Power 5 level. Hearing that is the fact that, and Noah Fifita is great, but, there are size concerns, whatnot. The fact that Arizona is now competing for these type of in-state players is, we're not used to this from neither the Rich Rod nor the Kevin Sumlin eras.
Yeah, and Rivals has him as the number 4 dual threat quarterback in the entire 2024 class. So, you wonder if it's a coincidence that he decommitted from Ole Miss shortly after Elijah Rushing made his commitment to Arizona. We talked last week about how Rushing's commitment could hopefully have a domino effect for top in-state recruits. Maybe they'll give us Arizona a second look or even a first look now that a guy like Elijah Rushing's committed there. But and the other thing is, you sort of touched on this, Eric, but you add Williams to a quarterback room that already has some potential in Noah Fifita and Braden Dorman, guys who are pretty well liked by the recruiting experts. And the Wildcats look like they're in great shape at that position for the next several years. Whether Delora sticks around after this season or not, they're going to have some very good options.
Yeah, is he eligible to stick around? I think he might be. Boy, Arizona might have some issues next year where they have to sort things out. If Delora were to stay, and then Fifita's going to want to play as a redshirt sophomore there. You've got Dorman, who's going to want to play as a redshirt freshman, and then you've got potentially Damon Williams, who may come in.
And maybe they bring in a transfer too. You never know.
And it will all sort itself out. But wow, that is a hell of a quarterback room to think about. All right, let's talk a little baseball just as we go around the horn here. Chase Davis, first round pick of, I believe it was the Cardinals.
St. Louis and 21st overall. Yeah.
Yep. Very cool to see that. The problem is things otherwise didn't go great for Arizona. Aiden May, who was one of their top starters at the end of the year, he just transferred today. A pitcher that they got from Pepperdine ended up signing with a major league team, so he's out.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah, the pitching staff. I know they have a new guy coming in, Kevin Vance coming in, but oh boy, it's not looking good for your guy there, Chip. Shane.
For my guy, my Chip Hale apologist is my official title now. It's important to note that Chip Hale also didn't recruit Chase Davis, but the fact that he stayed in Arizona and improved his time here is a good sign, and will hopefully provide a boost for Chip and his staff. But the St. Louis took him at number 21 overall, which is great. Arizona had 5 players picked in the MLB draft. Only 5 schools had more. Wow. Which is kind of crazy to think about. But so that's at least something the coaching staff can discuss when they're on the recruiting trail, if nothing else. But yeah, it's tough when for the coaching staff, it feels like they're starting to get a little momentum, at least in terms of pitching. And, sometimes it just feels like 1 step forward and 2 steps back.
Yeah, listen, I want to see, I'm not gonna, bash Chip and whatnot. Let's see what he does this offseason. And if he can, bring in some more players. It's always tough. The baseball draft is tougher than most, where you don't know who you're going to be able to keep or lose after that in certain, especially from a high school recruiting perspective. That's why the transfer portal is so important. He goes and gets this pitcher from Pepperdine that makes a whole deal out of it on social media the other week. And then, he gets an offer and signs. So, and he's gone. So who knows?
Just that's the world we live in. You remember the receiver from Wisconsin who he was verbally committed to Arizona, and then the next day Wisconsin announces that he's going there instead.
Yeah, that's right.
Crazy stuff. You don't, and you know what? That goes back to the Wildcat Country curse, Eric. We've made it a rule. We don't have guys on until they sign their letter of intent, and even then things can happen. But we've learned the hard way not to have guys on after they just make a verbal commitment, because a lot of those guys are playing and succeeding elsewhere.
We've had some poor success with that in previous years. That's why we don't do it again. And then finally, Shane, on our show tonight. Want to talk, give an RIP, a rest in peace to the Ooh Aah Man, Joe Cavallari, who passed away earlier this week. Just maybe a thought or two on what you remember about his uniqueness.
Yeah, and a lot of newer fans at Arizona and students going there may not know a lot about him unless they've read about him the last several days. But yeah, he was a guy who, long story short, would really rally the fans during games. Later in the later years, when I remember, he was at the Arizona men's basketball games, and he would come out during one of the timeouts, usually in the second half, and help basically spell with his arms Arizona. He'd do it a couple, like in one direction, then the other direction. He'd take one pair of his shorts off in the middle of it, and then he didn't have another pair underneath, so it's all good.
It's crazy. He had so many layers of clothing.
Yeah.
I don't know how he did it. It was wild.
But yeah, he would do that. Then he would point to each section at McHale Center. This is my memory of him at McHale Center, and get him to chant U of A, and then eventually the whole arena would do it in unison. And I remember the last time in particular that I saw him was when Arizona played Washington in Sean Miller's second season.
That's right. I remember that. Yeah,
that was a game. Derek Williams blocked to seal it. Were you there for that one too?
I was. Now,
real quick, real fun, funny story. Greg Byrne did his ticket giveaways at the time. And this was such a big game. It was a nationally televised game that he had a contest, you have to get him 10 more Twitter followers. And so I was trying to get those tickets because I wanted to take my nephew Zach to the game. And then I remember on the fly, we had a couple of family members make Twitter accounts and follow Greg Byrne. And so So we got him, and then we were a half hour late because the traffic was awful. We were there for the entire second half, and it was a great game. And then the reason I mentioned it is because toward the end of the game, I think it was a close game. I was late in the game. I think Arizona was down by a couple points, and here comes the Ooh Aah Man out to do his thing. And he wasn't in the best of health at the time, so he was kind of moving more gingerly. But he came out and he did it, and Arizona went on to win. And so that is my lasting memory of the Ooh Aah Man, and a guy who was not an official mascot or official member of the university, but he was a great supporter of the university, and he'll be missed.
Yeah, he was a great ambassador. And I remember the one thing about that game is the whiteout. Yeah. Because we weren't really used to that. We're like, well, this is kind of a rare thing to be a part of this whiteout. So it was kind of fun to do that. And I do remember him coming out. I remember the first time in college, in the early 2000s when he came out, I'm like, who is this guy? Yeah. And why is he taking off all his clothes in the center of the court? But
if you never saw him before, you think security, go get that guy.
Right, I was like, what's going on? But he really got the crowd. I mean, more than I've ever seen at an Arizona game. And he ended up having tickets to a few games in my section in football over the years. Oh, yeah. So I'd see him, and he just, he didn't look like he was in terribly good health, unfortunately. Died fairly young in his early 70s, which is kind of a shame. But, to have a legacy, we all want to have some kind of a legacy, with people that we know, right? This guy was fortunate enough to appeal to an entire fan base. If you were in McHale Center anytime between the late 70s and the early 2000s,
late 2000s.
Yeah. Okay, late 2000s. Yeah, you knew who Joe Cavallari was. That says something.
And my last thought on it, Eric, is I think it reminds you that the best sports traditions are the ones that sort of happen organically. You know, it's not like you go to an NBA game and during timeout they have the whatever cam they do now. The gimmicky stuff, or Jedd Fisch has been great, but the country song he tried was terrible. But the Ooh Aah Man, it just kind of happened naturally, and he kind of got this role, and it wasn't anything special. There was no music. It was just him in the middle of the court, taking layers of clothes off and getting fans invested in the game. And I loved it. It's it is one of the reasons why I'm proud to be an alum, because of just kind of random stuff like that. And he, like I said, he will be greatly missed.
Yes, he will. And as I said, we can all hope to leave a legacy in some way where we, are as celebrated as what Joe was to Arizona fans. So rest in peace to him, and condolences to his family. But I want to thank Phil Steele for joining us here. Great to catch up with him for our annual interview. So for Shane Dale, I'm Eric Cohen. Thanks for listening. And as always, bear down.